Welcome to Daily Wisdom, Walking the Path with the Buddha, a podcast shared by David Roylance. This podcast is dedicated to guiding you to completely eliminate the discontent mind and the suffering it causes by attaining enlightenment. Learn and practice the teachings of Gotama Buddha that will guide you to fully attain a peaceful, calm, serene, and content mind with joy. To support this podcast, visit patreon.com/support Buddha or visit buddhadailywisdom.com, where you will discover a full range of courses, retreats, and online learning resources to assist you on the path to enlightenment. Now, here's our teacher to share more.
Sawadee Kap. Hello and welcome to Daily Wisdom, Walking the Path with the Buddha. Today is our Pali Canon and English study group, and we're studying the words of the Buddha. We're in Volume 3, chapters 71 through 80. So welcome to all of you guys, whether you're joining for the first time or you're joining regularly. The way that we do this program is I invite people in Zoom to be able to volunteer to read a chapter from our book. And then after someone reads it, I'll spend a little bit of time teaching about that chapter. Then I'll open up to any and all questions that you guys have related to that particular chapter. If you've been reading the chapters before class, it really helps prepare you for the actual class because you have the words of the Buddha, you have a reference back to the original source teachings, and you have words from me. But if you haven't read the book prior, it's okay. You can still study in today's class. It's just that perhaps maybe you would like to read after the class because you're going to see some words from me that are going to go in depth to help you further understand the teachings of the Buddha. So welcome to all of you guys. Nice to see you, whether you're joining through Facebook, YouTube, Zoom, or any of the other places that we live stream to, or even if you're watching this on the replay, welcome to everyone. If there's anyone who would like to volunteer to read that is in Zoom, just electronically raise your hand. I'll be able to see that, and then I'll be able to call on you. And then as you guys have questions, whether you're in Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, you can put that into the comments section. And then those of you guys in Zoom, you can also raise your hand and ask any and all questions that you like. So is there anyone who would like to read this first chapter? Okay, looks like Pat's going to read that one. He has a little practice from this morning already reading this one, right?
Yeah, I think I've read this one. Yes. Chapter 71. Craving and anger does not exist. Monks, there are these four things that are born. What for? Craving is born from craving. Anger is born from craving. Craving is born from anger, and anger is born from anger. When, distant from sense desires, distant from unwholesome mental states, enters and resides in the first jhana, which is with thinking and pondering, based in seclusion, filled with excitement and joy. On that occasion, craving born from craving does not exist in him. Anger born from craving does not exist in him. Craving born from anger does not exist in him. And anger born from anger does not exist in him. When, with the subsiding of thinking and pondering, by gaining inner tranquility and oneness of mind, he enters and resides in the second jhana, which is without thinking and pondering, based in concentration, filled with excitement and joy. The third jhana, the fourth jhana, on that occasion, craving born from craving does not exist in him. Anger born from craving does not exist in him. Craving born from anger does not exist in him. And anger born from anger does not exist in him.
Okay, thank you, Pat. So here the Buddha is talking about once somebody gets into the jhanas, these four things don't exist in the mind any longer. The jhanas are those preliminary phases that the mind moves through on its way to the first stage of enlightenment. The way you get into the jhanas is you practice the entire Eightfold Path. Right view, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. Practicing all of these in the way that I've taught it in the foundational programs will move the mind into the jhanas after you've developed your practice really well. This is one of the first indications that you get that your mind is really moving closer and closer to enlightenment, because the quality of the mind that you experience in the jhanas is like night and day compared to what you were experiencing when you were off the path to enlightenment. You'll see incremental changes as you're putting together the Eightfold Path, but it's when your mind gets into those jhanas and you start seeing the description that the Buddha described over 2,500 years ago of what the jhanas are, that you're like, oh wow, he described this 2,500 years ago. I practiced his teachings, and here I am experiencing the very things that he said I would experience. It gets really real when you start experiencing these jhanas. This is like the light bulb flickering as the mind is starting to experience these enhanced qualities. They're individual phases that the mind goes through. It's not just in meditation that you experience these jhanas. This is one of the misunderstandings in the world. And it's not that you can turn these jhanas on or off. The mind actually resides in these jhanas. You can see it here, where the Buddha talks about residing in the jhanas. These are qualities that you're building as you make your way to enlightenment. And just to give you guys kind of an understanding of some of the qualities here, is once you get into the second jhana, there's what's called unification of the mind, or oneness of mind. You can see it here. One moment, I'll kind of point it out for you if I can find it here. Maybe it's not in here because we've kind of truncated it. I think it's, oh, here it is right here, oneness of mind. What this is that in the unenlightened state, before you get to the second jhana, you have a conscious mind and a subconscious mind. Both minds are actually polluted. The conscious mind isn't as polluted as the subconscious. The subconscious mind is more heavily polluted. If you've ever been around people before and you just kind of blurted something out, and when you blurted it out, you're like, I don't feel that way. I don't think that way. Where did that come from? You have no idea where that came from. It came from your subconscious mind throwing thoughts up into your conscious mind, and you just kind of blurt those things out without even thinking about it. And that's not even really the way that you think. It's down buried into the subconscious mind. Well, if you're going to get to purification of the mind, where the mind's fully purified and you're experiencing enlightenment, you're going to need to have full awareness of the entire mind. You're going to need to be able to dissolve this subconscious mind and get mindfulness or awareness of mind of the entire mind. And that's one of the things that's happening as you're moving through the jhanas. There's other qualities as well, but by the time you get to that second jhana, you have full awareness of the entire mind. There's no longer a conscious and subconscious mind. You can see the entire mind, and that's what you need in order to be able to purify it. You wouldn't be able to purify it if you weren't able to observe what was in the entire mind. So if you didn't have awareness of what was going on in the subconscious mind, you would never be able to purify it. So as your mind is moving into these preliminary phases of the jhanas, there are certain heightened qualities that you experience. The discontentedness has diminished by the time you've gotten into the jhanas, not as significantly as when you get to the first, second, third stage of enlightenment. Of course, the fourth stage, all the discontentedness is eliminated. But even in these jhanas, you'll see a decrease in your discontentedness. And these jhanas are temporary, that if you, say, got complacent while your mind was in the jhanas, you could regress out of those. But if you stay diligent and dedicated and you keep focusing on the 10 fetters, you can move into the first stage of enlightenment and beyond. And from there, you won't actually regress. Once the mind's in the first stage of enlightenment, it's impossible for it to regress backwards. But in these jhanas, you can still experience regression. But once the mind's in the jhanas, the Buddha is explaining that these four things no longer exist in the mind. There's still discontentedness in the mind. There's still craving, desire, attachment in the mind, but you're not going to experience these things that he's describing here. What craving born from craving is this is where there's a craving and then it spawns another craving. So say, for example, that you really, really want a brand new car, and there's this sports car or whatever kind of car it is that you really, 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 really want, and there's this longing, yearning, and this craving for it. Well, that can spawn another craving, where now you have a craving for money, and now you're chasing after money because you really want this car. So this is where craving is born from another craving. Then you can have anger that is born from craving. You guys are probably already familiar with this, that if you have a certain craving, desire, attachment, if you get what you want, you get those pleasant feelings. But if you don't get what you want, those painful feelings can come in. And one of the things that can arise in the mind is this anger, this hostility, this bitterness. Well, by the time you get to the jhanas, that has diminished, that you don't experience this intense anger. You'll still get frustrated, you'll still get agitated and annoyed when you're in the jhanas, but you're not going to have this anger that you might have had in the past. So that's been eliminated, it's been diminished. So now you're just experiencing a lesser degree of that. The anger is still there, the fetter of the ill will is still in the mind, but you're not experiencing that extreme of anger. Then you've got craving born from anger, where the mind is having craving because of anger. Let's just say you were really angry at your mom or dad for something, and you thought that they were actually the ones who were causing this anger, because prior to the jhanas, an individual might not have this wisdom where they're getting this anger from certain things that is going on in their day-to-day life. They don't realize it's from their craving, desire, attachment, and they perceive it as mom or dad is causing this anger because of certain things that they're doing. So when you're angry and you're outside the jhanas, there could be another craving that comes in, this longing, yearning, this wanting and expecting mom and dad to do a certain thing, and you might crave to try to change them because of the anger that you're actually having. So this is craving that comes about because of one's anger. The mind with the lack of wisdom thinks that the way to solve this anger is to get this person to do things the way I want them to do. So now the mind is in this constant loop of thinking that the way to solve the anger is to force other people to do things my way. So that's where the craving is born from, this anger. When in reality, the way to get rid of this anger is to eliminate the original craving that caused it. Then there's this anger that is born from anger. And here in these discourses, in these chapters, the way that I've done this is you've got the words of the Buddha here, you've got the reference here, which takes you back to the original Pali Canon, but then you've got words from me down here that are going to help you to better understand each one of these things. And this is why it's helpful to read these before class, because I'm giving you examples of each one of these, and I'm giving you some more insight here. So down here, anger is born from anger. You can see what I share is, if an individual has anger, this can arise further anger in the mind when one does not acquire the objects of their affection. For example, if a practitioner has anger because they were not able to acquire wealth, this could then arise further anger when increased promotions in one's career, increased money, lavish lifestyle, and luxury cars, clothing, jewelry, property, etc. are not acquired. So this anger, frustration, irritation, annoyance can arise in the mind based on the initial anger that the wealth was not acquired. And now there's this new anger that is motivating unskillful conduct, like intention, speech, and actions that are going to result in further difficulties in one's life. So this is the way that anger is born from anger. So when you get into the jhanas, the mind isn't experiencing these things. You're still experiencing discontentedness, you're still experiencing craving, you're still going to have frustration, agitation, annoyance, but you're not going to have craving stacked on top of craving. You're not going to have anger, that intense anger, and you're not going to have craving born from anger, and you're not going to have anger born from anger. These things have been diminished to a certain degree. So the Buddha is helping you to be able to see that. Any questions here on this particular chapter? Remember, you can put that into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom in the comment section, or you can raise your hand electronically in Zoom and ask any questions that you like. Just going to check here online and see if we have any questions. Apologize, I'm still a little bit sick here. Brought back a souvenir from Mexico. Okay, I don't see any questions anywhere. All right, so we're going to go to chapter 72. Would somebody like to read this one? Okay, Samantha, it looks like you were first, and Keely, if you'd like to take the next one, you're more than welcome.
Calm and reflection have part in true wisdom. Monks, these two qualities have part in true wisdom. What two? Calm and reflection. If cultivated, what profit does calm attain? The mind is cultivated. What profit results from a cultivated mind? All craving is abandoned. Monks, if reflection is cultivated, what profit does it attain? Wisdom is cultivated. If wisdom is cultivated, what profit does it attain? All ignorance is abandoned. A mind defiled by craving is not liberated, and wisdom defiled by ignorance is not developed. Thus, monks, through the fading away of craving, there is liberation of mind, and through the fading away of ignorance, there is liberation by wisdom.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. You know, I really enjoy the teachings of the Buddha. I think all of his teachings are amazing. They lead exactly where he said they do. But when he breaks it down so simply like this and just shows you so clearly what is leading to any particular result, it's so wonderful to be able to see this. Here, what he's saying is there's these two things that lead to true wisdom. And remember, that's the ultimate goal in the path to enlightenment, is to cultivate wisdom. So he's saying these are the two things that it would be wise for you to cultivate as qualities in the mind. mind, because that's what's going to help you to get to the wisdom of awakening to the natural laws and thus help you get to enlightenment. And he's saying calm and reflection is what's going to lead to this true wisdom. And now he explains to you exactly how that is the case. He says, if cultivated, what benefit or what profit does calm attain, where the mind is calm? Well, if the mind's calm, that means the mind is cultivated. That means you've developed your mind. Well, what profit or what benefit is the result of a cultivated mind? All craving is abandoned. So when your mind is eliminating craving, desire, attachment, that's where you're going to experience more and more calm and more peace. So a cultivated mind where you can maintain your calmness and composure, essentially all cravings will be abandoned. And that's where the mind's actually enlightened. And then he says, okay, monks, because there's this other quality, this reflection that he's saying that is beneficial to attain wisdom and ultimately get to enlightenment. He's saying, what benefit does this reflection attain? Reflection is where you're looking inward and you're trying to look at the things that you're doing and the decisions that you're making. What is wise that's leading to wholesome results, and what is unwise that's leading to unwholesome results. You might call this self-analysis. Even though there is no self there, you might refer to it that way or think of it in that way, that you're looking at your life, you're looking inward, you're looking at the mind, trying to figure out and reflect what is wise and unwise, because you'd like to continue to do wise things that are leading to wholesome results, and you'd like to eliminate any unwise things that are leading to unwholesome results. And the Buddha teaches you these things, but you're going to need to be able to be reflective and see some of these things for yourself. So if you're doing reflection, where you're looking inward and trying to cultivate what is wise and unwise, it leads to wisdom. That's what reflection leads to. And then if you cultivate wisdom, what is the benefit of that? Well, all ignorance is abandoned from the mind. And that's what you need to be able to do in order to get to enlightenment. And when we're talking about eliminating ignorance or the unknowing of true reality, it's not just the intellectual learning, it's the practice part. Right? Because you can intellectually understand the teachings of the Buddha to a certain degree, but if you haven't reflected to be able to cultivate wisdom, and then you're not practicing, there's still a lack of wisdom. There's still ignorance. So I might know in the past that it was unwise to use drugs and alcohol. I might have known that intellectually, but we still did it. Right? Because that's because of our ignorance. We didn't have full wisdom. We didn't have true wisdom at that point because we were still practicing and making unwise decisions to use drugs and alcohol. But when we completely eradicate ignorance, we'll see that our practice is informed based on that wisdom, that we will not only intellectually know it's unwise to do certain things, but we will actually not be doing those things. Or we will know certain things are wise and we will actually do those things because we know that they're wise. And it's through this reflection and cultivation of wisdom that's going to abandon all that ignorance and get you to the point where you're actually practicing the teachings. That's where the ignorance is fully eliminated. So here the Buddha is saying a mind defiled by craving is not liberated. What he's saying is that a mind that is polluted by craving is not free. It's still experiencing the strong feelings. The mind is not enlightened if it's polluted with craving, desire, attachment. And wisdom defiled by ignorance or unknowing of true reality is not developed. So if you have a certain amount of intellectual understanding, but it's polluted with this unknowing of true reality, then the mind is not developed. That's where you can intellectually know something, but you're not actually practicing it. And that means your wisdom is polluted with this ignorance that the mind is not yet fully practicing. And now the Buddha says, thus, monks, through fading away of craving, there is liberation of mind. So by eliminating craving, desire, attachment, the mind is free of these strong feelings. That's where the mind's moving to enlightenment. And then through the fading away of ignorance, the mind is liberated or free by wisdom. It's the cultivation of wisdom that's going to lead to the enlightened mental state, the freedom from strong feelings. And that's why from the very beginning of the first day you might have started studying with me, I shared with you, don't believe any teachings, because you can't get to liberation through belief. You have to cultivate wisdom in order to be able to get to what is wise and unwise, so that then you can actually experience liberation of the mind and peacefulness and joy in the mind. So let me know what questions you guys have here. This is chapter 72, Calm and Reflection have part in true wisdom. All right, I'm not seeing any questions anywhere. So let's move to the next chapter, which is chapter 73, And Keely, if you would like to read this one, you're more than welcome to. All right, ma'am.
One who inclines towards nirvana, enlightenment, monks, just as the river Ganges stands, slopes, and inclines towards the east, so too a monk who develops and cultivates the four jhanas stands, slopes, and inclines towards nirvana, enlightenment. And how, monks, does a monk who develops and cultivates the four jhana stand, slope, and incline towards nirvana, enlightenment? Here, a monk, distant from sense desires, distant from unwholesome mental states, enters and resides in the first jhana, which is with thinking and pondering, based in seclusion, filled with excitement and joy, and with the subsiding of thinking and pondering, by gaining inner tranquility and oneness of mind, he enters and resides in the second jhana, which is without thinking and pondering, based in concentration, filled with excitement and joy, and with the fading away of excitement, remaining imperturbable, unable to be upset or excited, calm, serene, mindful, and clearly aware. He experiences in himself the joy of which the noble ones say, peaceful is he who resides with equanimity and mindfulness. He enters the third jhana, and having given up pleasure and pain, and with the fading away of former gladness and sadness, he enters and resides in the fourth jhana, which is beyond pleasure and pain, and purified by the equanimity and mindfulness. It is in this way, monks, that a monk who develops and cultivates the four jhanas stands, slopes, and inclines towards nirvana, enlightenment. That's all. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Keely. So here, what the Buddha is saying is that by developing and cultivating the four jhanas, those four preliminary phases, on your way to the first stage of enlightenment, it inclines and slants and slopes towards enlightenment itself. You would actually need to develop the four jhanas in order to be able to get to the first stage of enlightenment and beyond to enlightenment itself. So as you're making your way to the first stage of enlightenment, having put together the Eightfold Path, and you're starting to experience those qualities of the jhanas, that's what you need in order to be able to make your way further on the path to enlightenment. So cultivating the jhanas and making sure that you're putting together the Eightfold Path really well to experience those jhanas is very crucial on your development and on your path to getting to the first, second, third, and fourth stage of enlightenment. Any questions here on this particular chapter? Okay, it looks like Vibhav has a question. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you, David. I had a question on not in this directly, but like I think there's I don't know if it's included in this teaching, but these are the four jhanas, form jhanas, right? And then the four formless jhanas, are they only experienced after as part of the fourth jhana, after the fourth jhana, or can they be experienced anytime during the jhanas? Because it seems like in the text it's always added after the four jhanas, the form jhanas.
There's only four jhanas. That's what we're talking about here. The other ones are attainments that you can experience on your way to enlightenment. And sometimes you experience those during the time that you're in the jhanas, but it could also be afterwards. So those other ones that you're looking at, those aren't jhanas, those are just attainments that one might experience on their way to enlightenment.
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, let me see if we have anything else. All right, so let's go to the next chapter. This is chapter 74. Is there someone who would like to read this? Okay, Vibhav, go ahead, sir.
Thank you. A great fruit and benefit of breathing mindfulness meditation, anapanasati. Monks, mindfulness of breathing mindfulness meditation, when developed and cultivated, is of great fruit and benefit. And how, monks, is mindfulness of breathing mindfulness meditation, developed and cultivated so that it is of great fruit and benefit? Here, a monk having gone to the forest, to the foot of a tree or an empty hut, sits down, having folded his legs crosswise, straightened his body and set up mindfulness in front of him, just mindful he breathes in, mindful he breathes out.
Okay.
Breathing in long, he knows, I breathe in long. Or breathing out long, he knows, I breathe out long. Breathing in short, he knows, I breathe in short. Or breathing out short, he knows, I breathe out short. He trains thus, experiencing the whole body, I will breathe in. He trains thus, experiencing the whole body, I will breathe out. He trains thus, calming the bodily sensations, I will breathe in. He trains thus, calming the bodily sensations, I will breathe out. He trains thus, experiencing joy, I will breathe in. He trains thus, experiencing joy, I will breathe out. He trains thus, experiencing peacefulness, I will breathe in. He trains thus, experiencing peacefulness, I will breathe out. He trains thus, experiencing the mental activity, I will breathe in. He trains thus, experiencing the mental activity, I will breathe out. He trains thus, calming the mental activity, I will breathe in. He trains thus, calming the mental activity, I will breathe out. He trains thus, experiencing the mind, I will breathe in. He trains thus, experiencing the mind, I will breathe out. He trains thus, gladdening the mind, I will breathe in. He trains thus, gladdening the mind, I will breathe out. He trains thus, concentrating the mind, I will breathe in. He trains thus, concentrating the mind, I will breathe out. He trains thus, liberating the mind, I will breathe in. He trains thus, liberating the mind, I will breathe out. He trains thus, reflecting on impermanence, I will breathe in. He trains thus, reflecting on impermanence, I will breathe out. He trains thus, reflecting on fading away, I will breathe in. He trains thus, reflecting on fading away, I will breathe out. He trains thus, reflecting on elimination, I will breathe in. He trains thus, reflecting on elimination, I will breathe out. He trains thus, reflecting on letting go, I will breathe in. He trains thus, reflecting on letting go, I will breathe out. It is, monks, when mindfulness of breathing mindfulness meditation is developed and cultivated in this way, that it is of great fruit and benefit. When, monks, mindfulness of breathing mindfulness meditation, has been developed and cultivated in this way, one of two fruits may be predicted, either final knowledge, wisdom, in this very life, or there is a residue of clinging, the state of non-returner.
Okay, thank you, Vibhav. So here what the Buddha is describing is that practicing breathing mindfulness meditation leads to one of two things. It either leads to final knowledge, which is actually enlightenment, or if there's still some residual clinging, meaning some minimal clinging left over, then an individual will experience the third stage of enlightenment. And from there, of course, they're reborn into the heavenly world and they attain enlightenment from that existence. So he's saying that's the goal, that's the purpose, that's what breathing mindfulness meditation leads to, is either the third or fourth stage of enlightenment. And that's why it's helpful to be able to cultivate it and practice it. And what he does in this discourse is he gives the details of how to actually practice breathing mindfulness meditation, and he walks you through his guidance and his instructions on meditation. So just like when you learned to brush your teeth when you were a child and your parents taught you step by step of how to brush your teeth, it was like, here, put the toothpaste on, wet the toothbrush, put it in your mouth, stroke it back and forth, however it is that they taught you. You had to learn step by step. But now when you actually brush your teeth, you don't think about any of that stuff, you just do it. But when you first started learning, you had to think about each individual step that they taught you in order to get really proficient and be able to move the toothbrush back and forth and actually be able to brush your teeth. So that's what the Buddha is doing here. He's giving you the step-by-step instruction, but this isn't something that you have to keep in mind all the way through as you're meditating. You just need to know it as you first get started, and then ultimately you just do it. So I'm going to walk you through this so you can see this. So I consolidate this in the way that I give guidance, in the way that I guide you in meditation. I consolidate it in a way that you can put it into practice right away. When you hear me guiding people in meditation, this is what I'm teaching you. So here he says, okay, going to the forest, to the foot of a tree or an empty hut, you sit down, right? Remember, there's 4 positions: seated, lying, standing, and and walking. So you would learn and use those 4 different positions in different ways. But here he's talking about the sitting meditation. And during that lifetime, they would go to the forest, to the foot of a tree or an empty hut, where today, there's many different places you could actually meditate. You don't need to just meditate in those kinds of places. Then, if you're sitting down on the floor, you would fold your legs crosswise, straighten up the body, like I always share, with the sternum up and the shoulders back, keeping the upper body erect. This keeps the mind attentive and alert. And then you set up mindfulness in front of you. That's where I do the chanting. That helps to build awareness of mind. That's what setting up mindfulness in front of you is that it helps you to build awareness of mind, where you're not interested in just plopping down into meditation. So you start to do some chanting perhaps, or something else to build this awareness of mind so you can start getting benefit right from the beginning. And then you start breathing in and breathing out. You start to establish the breath. Then as you establish the breath, the Buddha here is saying if it's long or short, you know that it's long or short. What he's saying here is focus the mind on the breath. Bring the mind to the breath. Initially, you're just getting the breath going, but now you would like to focus the mind on the breath. Then, as you're focused on the breath, you're going to start experiencing the bodily sensations, like a little itch here or there in the body. And when you're experiencing that, you would like to calm it with the mind. Keep focusing the mind on the breath, right? Whenever you're experiencing bodily sensations, I will breathe in, I will breathe out, right? This means like when you experience bodily sensations, cut that off and bring the mind back to the breath. He talks about cutting it off in other places in his discourses, but here what he's saying is when you experience bodily sensations, just focus on the breath. That's all you need to do, right? And calm the bodily sensations with the mind, understanding that these things are impermanent. But then as you're doing that, the mind's going to start experiencing joy and peacefulness. This is where you'll start noticing joy springing up in the mind, and there's this peacefulness. But when that's occurring, don't indulge in that and follow that. You would like to cut that off. If it's unconditioned joy and peacefulness, you're not going to be able to cut it off. It's just going to persist there. But don't be looking at it. Don't be observing it. Don't indulge in it. Just focus on the breath. Let the joy arise in the mind. Let the peacefulness come into the mind. But you just focus on the breath. Don't get all indulgent into the joy or peacefulness, because then it's going to actually go away if you do that. But if you just keep focusing on the breath, and it's kind of like, yeah, I see you joy there, I see you peacefulness, but I'm just going to focus on the breath. And the more you focus on the breath, the joy and peacefulness is going to become more and more profound, and the mind's going to be enveloped more and more in this joy and peacefulness. Then, as you experience mental activity, meaning any kind of thoughts or ideas or anything like that, keep focusing on the breath. This is what's going to calm the mental activity. That when the mind moves off the breath, focus on the breath. That's what the Buddha is saying, is get off of that thought, calm that mental activity, and just bring the mind back to the breath. Then you're going to be experiencing this mind. You're going to be experiencing all different aspects of the mind. And then you're going to need to gladden the mind. This is like brighten up the mind and uplift the mind. As this is occurring, you just focus on the breath. And then the mind becomes concentrated. When you start having focus and clarity in the mind, keep focusing on the breath. Even though you see that concentration coming into the mind, just keep focusing on the breath. Don't pay attention to the concentration. Don't pay attention to these other things. Just keep coming back to the breath is what the Buddha is explaining to you. And as you're doing this, the mind's going to become more and more liberated, more and more free of these strong feelings. If you need to, as you're in meditation and there's a thought or an idea or something like this that comes up in the mind, as you're first getting started with meditation, you might need to remind yourself that thought is impermanent. Let it go, let it go, let it go. And now just come back to the breath. You don't need to literally sit there and think about impermanence. You just need to maybe remind yourself every once in a while as the mind is running off to this thought is like, that's impermanent. Bring the mind back to the breath. That's what he keeps saying. I will breathe in. I will breathe out. He's guiding you to keep coming back to the breath over and over and over again. And then you will notice that these things will fade away. And you'll notice that there's this elimination. And you'll notice this letting go, where the mind is actually letting go. And this is what's going to lead to more and more improvement in the mind. That's what the Buddha is sharing here, is that this is what leads to great fruit and benefit, is training the mind to let go. Because remember, your goal in breathing mindfulness meditation isn't to eliminate your thoughts. It's to know that you've had a thought sooner and sooner, and to let it go easier and easier. That's the ultimate goal. Because even in an enlightened being, they're going to experience occasional thoughts in their meditation. But when they have one, they're going to know it, and they're going to be able to easily let it go. And then there's going to be this quietness and stillness between their thoughts. In the unenlightened state, you might get a bombardment of thoughts, or you might indulge in that thought for a period of time. And you would like to let go, let go, let go. And that's what the Buddha is guiding you to do here. And this is what's leading to final knowledge, which is enlightenment, or the third stage of enlightenment. So let me know what questions you guys have here on this particular discourse. You can put that into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or you can raise your hand in Zoom and ask any questions that you like. Okay, I don't see any questions. Oh, Vibhav, you have a question? Go ahead, sir.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to confirm, like when the part where it says reflecting on impermanence and reflecting on elimination, we don't have to actually reflect that. That's what you're saying, right? That was my question. I wasn't clear whether you have to actually do something or just focus on the breath.
Yeah, if you've been meditating for any length of time in the way that I guide students, you may not even need this anymore. But initially, like the first few months that someone starts meditating, they might need to remind themselves every once in a while that that thought that they're having is impermanent, and that will help them to bring their mind back to the breath. But if you're easily able to notice that you have thoughts and let them go, you won't even need to do this anymore. But this is what you'll need to do as someone's first getting started, is they're going to need to remind themselves occasionally that that thought is impermanent, and that helps you to bring your mind back to the breath. But there's nothing you have to do once you already know how to do that. Once you already know how to notice the thought and let it go, there's nothing more that you have to do. You don't have to keep doing these things over and over and over again. Just like brushing your teeth, you don't have to think about every single step. You just know to focus on the breath, and when the mind moves off the breath, cut it off and let it go and bring the mind back to the breath. And if you're able to easily do that, then you're good. But if you need some help every once in a while by reminding yourself that that thought is impermanent, then bring your mind back to the breath and focus on the breath, and feel free to use that. But you would ultimately like to be able to just internally cut off and let go, where you don't have to remind yourself of this. But initially you might need to, in order to get the mind to build the quality of being able to notice the thought and to be able to let it go.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, it looks like Leo has a question. Go ahead, sir.
I just wondering, I think it's quite difficult for someone who maybe doesn't have so much wisdom or to understand what he wants to share here, right? Because, yeah, I think if I would read it first, I would think, okay, I need to reflect on the fading away and so on, reflect on the body. So yeah, I just thought about it. That's maybe the reason why some teachers do like vipassana and stuff like that, because they think, oh, I need to be making a body scan. Yeah, I was following a teacher. I think he took it quite serious, all the steps. He seemed to really know the teachings, but he was like, the beginning was breathing in short, like or long, and then breathing in short, like short breaths, because he said, yeah, the Buddha says, you need to know your short breaths, you need to understand your short breaths, you need to understand your long breaths, and so on. So he took it really serious. So yeah, I was just interested that you interpreted in this way, and other teachers have a different interpretation of how to practice these teachings. Do you have some words on that?
What is that called when somebody has different ideas and different thoughts and two people aren't agreeing on the same thing?
Not sure.
You're not sure?
What do you mean?
Is everybody going to agree on the same things?
No, it's impermanence. Yeah.
Right. So different teachers are going to think differently, right? And what you need to be able to do is take a discourse like this and then look at the totality of what the Buddha is teaching you. If you've seen that discourse that I've shown in class with you many times, where the Buddha talks about breathing mindfulness meditation, and the goal of that is to cut off thoughts. Do you remember that? Do you remember that?
So.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you combine that with something like this, and you understand that the Buddha is not teaching you to sit in meditation and constantly have thoughts and to constantly reflect on these kinds of things. What he's teaching you is to focus on the breath. That's why he's saying he trains thus, reflecting on impermanence, I will breathe in. He trains thus, reflecting on impermanence, I will breathe out. In other words, keep focusing on the breath. Cut off those thoughts. So you need to be able to see the totality of the teachings. And unfortunately, not everybody understands the teachings in the same way. But more and more, if you practice what it is that I teach you based on the guidance that I give, you'll see that it works.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, so maybe the students who translated that or who put this into writing or put this into a book, or maybe the language was different. So that's why it's a bit confusing how he was writing it, like using the word reflecting and so on. I think it's because of different language and translation and...
Yeah, we can't get into the head of another teacher, but what I can do for you is I can teach you how to meditate and how to actually do this, and it's actually going to work. So like when I'm teaching and you see me guiding you in meditation where I say, focus on the breath, develop a nice, gradual, steady, consistent breath, experiencing the whole breath, go through all the guidance that I give you. Once you get into meditation, you're not thinking about all that guidance that I gave you. You're just focused on the breath, and when the mind moves off the breath, you cut that off and let it go and bring the mind back to the breath. The goal of your meditation isn't to sit there and repetitively go over all the guidance that I gave you. The goal of your meditation is to focus on the breath, and when it moves off, you cut it off and let it go. And that's the same thing here, that the Buddha is giving someone guidance of how to meditate, but then when you actually meditate, you're not thinking about all these different things during your meditation, just like when you're brushing your teeth. So someone who's sitting there thinking about all of these things while they're meditating, their mind hasn't actually let go yet. That's why the mind needs to learn how to cut off thoughts and let go, because the mind's having those conditioned feelings and you got to train it to let go. So when you understand what enlightenment is, when you understand what the goal is, and you look at the teachings of the Buddha in their totality, you will come to understand that you don't need to repetitively be thinking about these during meditation, because it would actually distract you and hinder you from being able to get to enlightenment. The idea of sitting in meditation and thinking about things is actually the whole problem. And you're trying to train your mind not to do that, is to be able to internally cut off and let go. And this is just the guidance that the Buddha is giving on the way into meditation. But then once you're in meditation, you just do the work of focusing on the breath. That just like you don't pay attention to the guidance that I'm giving you, that you might listen to that as I'm getting you into meditation. But then once you're in meditation, you're just doing the work. And the same thing is here.
Okay, thank you.
Yep,
yeah.
You're welcome. Okay, so let's go to the next chapter, chapter 75. Is there someone who would like to read this? Okay, Samantha, go ahead, ma'am.
Breathing mindfulness meditation, an excellent and peaceful dwelling. The Buddha commented on the incidences of monks dying through suicide by themselves or by encouraging and assisting others to do so. On this occasion, the perfectly enlightened one had given them the discourses of anapanasati, breathing mindfulness meditation. Monks, this concentration by mindfulness of breathing, when developed and cultivated, is peaceful and superb, an excellent and peaceful dwelling, and it dissolves and extinguishes right on the spot evil, unwholesome states whenever they arise. Just as monks, in the last month of the hot season, when a mass of dust and dirt has swirled up, a great rain cloud out of season disperses it and extinguishes it on the spot, so too concentration by mindfulness of breathing, when developed and cultivated, is superb and peaceful, an excellent and peaceful dwelling, and it dissolves and extinguishes on the spot evil, unwholesome states whenever they arise. And how is this so? Here a monk, having gone to the forest to the foot of a tree or to an empty hut, sits down.
We don't need to
having
read.
Folded his legs.
We don't need to read the rest.
Crosswise.
We don't need to read the rest of this, Samantha, because
Okay,
it's the
same as before.
Yeah, we can just finish up here.
Okay. It is in this way, monks, that concentration by mindfulness of breathing is developed and cultivated so that it is peaceful and superb, an excellent and peaceful dwelling, and it dissolves and extinguishes on the spot evil, unwholesome states whenever they arise.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. So here, the word had come to the Buddha through his other students that there were students who were killing themselves by suicide, and there were other people who were encouraging others to do the same. So if you can imagine during the lifetime of a Buddha, there's countless people studying with an actual Buddha, and there's a certain core group of people who are studying very closely and practicing the teachings closely, but then there's people in the outer fringes who aren't necessarily practicing the teachings very closely, and those would be the people who are choosing to kill themselves because they're not understanding that this is one of the most detrimental things you could ever do, right? If you don't have the wisdom to understand that those painful feelings that you're experiencing are impermanent and they're coming from your own mind, and you don't understand the cycle of rebirth, you might think that suicide is actually a way out. Because if you're experiencing those painful feelings and you don't know how to eliminate them, and you think you only have one life, someone might think killing themselves would be ideal. But this isn't going to produce any beneficial results. In fact, there's the potential that you could be reborn into the hell realm, the afflicted spirit realm, or the animal realm. And now in these lower realms, it's actually going to be harder and harder to now get back to the human realm, where the human realm is the ideal existence to be in, and now someone has a real opportunity to make their way to enlightenment and escape the painful feelings permanently. But if we kill ourselves, then that's not going to lead to improvement to the condition of the mind. But someone who thinks they only have one life and they don't understand impermanence and they don't understand craving, desire, attachment through the Four Noble Truths, they might think that's a way out. So the Buddha is helping his students to understand that suicide isn't the way to experience improvement in one's life, but instead it's this breathing mindfulness meditation, that this is going to extinguish and dissolve evil, unwholesome states on the spot when they arise. So if you're practicing breathing mindfulness meditation regularly, 2 or 3 times a day for 30 minutes or more, when you have some thought that comes into the mind that you don't particularly care for, you can do breathing mindfulness meditation and train your mind to cut that off and let it go. If you are only doing meditation once a month or once a year, it's not the case. But if you can gradually training your mind and building up your practice, say you have a thought of jealousy that comes up in your mind. When you start experiencing that jealousy, you can do your breathing mindfulness meditation and cut that off and let it go. Or you experience some annoyance or frustration or something like that, you could use breathing mindfulness meditation to cut that off and let it go. The more well-developed your mind is, the easier this is going to be for your mind. Remember that teaching that the Buddha shares, that if you don't meditate, if you become complacent, you'll regret it later. And that's because you're not going to have this skill and this ability and this practice to be able to easily let go. Because there's going to be things that are happening in your life that you don't even see right now that are going to trigger certain cravings. Maybe one of your relatives die, or maybe a tree falls on your house or something like this. Who knows what impermanence might come to visit you. And if one of those cravings get triggered, if you have developed a breathing mindfulness meditation consistently, you'll be able to use that as a tool to train your mind to eliminate this. So you can get ahead of the curve, so to speak. You can be proactive in developing your practice so that whenever anything comes up, because you don't know what impermanence you're going to deal with and potentially what cravings, desires, attachments are in the mind, you have the ability to easily let this go. And the Buddha is using this story of this dust cloud at the end of hot season, where this massive dust and dirt is swirling up, and now this great rain cloud out of season starts to rain, and it disperses and extinguishes this dust cloud on the spot. And he's saying, so too, when you develop the concentration of breathing mindfulness meditation, it's going to eliminate those evil, unwholesome states, and in the same way as this. So let me know what questions you guys have on this chapter. Remember, you can put that into Facebook, YouTube, or in Zoom. Okay, Samantha, you have a question?
Yes, I'm just thinking about in the past when you've said that, learning the path to enlightenment and whatnot can stir up a lot of uneasy feelings for people, a lot of restlessness, maybe bring up past experiences that need to deal with. I'm just wondering how many people would maybe go on to commit suicide as a result of this, if they don't have the breathing mindfulness meditation under their belt, if that's a common occurrence, or if you've had any dealings with that?
I haven't seen anybody who's learning with me decide to commit suicide. I do have someone very early on when I first started teaching that he was having depression before he ever met me, and his father had committed suicide, and his mother was trying to get him to come to Thailand and study with me. And he committed suicide before he ever actually came to study with me. But nobody that's ever been studying with me has committed suicide, because one of the things that I do is I teach people that, hey, you can reach out to me as you need help, right? I haven't even had anybody that was on the verge of committing suicide. Now, I've had people that have said that they've had thoughts of committing suicide in the past, and they started having those thoughts at different times as they were learning and practicing, but they then practiced the teachings, and they were understanding that that wasn't a wise choice for them, and they've gotten further and further away from those suicidal thoughts, because that's one of the things that the mind can have even before you get on the path to enlightenment, is you can have suicidal thoughts, and it's this path to enlightenment that's going to cure all of that. But if you've been taught and you take action to be able to reach out and get help, then you won't commit suicide. So in this situation, these students were choosing suicide versus reaching out to the Buddha, right? If you were learning with the Buddha and you were having thoughts of suicide, you'd probably just go like, hey, I need to go talk to the Buddha. I need to figure this out. Like, man, I'm not interested in killing myself, and the Buddha can help me. So, that's probably what you would do. But these people were so far away from the teachings that they didn't even choose to do that. But you will see people, if you look on the news, if you look on the internet, you'll see people that are meditating and trying to train their mind, and they actually do commit suicide. But in pretty much all these situations, those people aren't studying with an actual teacher. And this is one of the reasons why it's so important to have a teacher, that you wouldn't be able to get to enlightenment without the guidance of a teacher. Only a Buddha would be able to do that, because your mind can kind of implode on itself if you were trying to do this on your own, because you don't have the guidance that you need. So I've seen a couple articles here and there of people that were going to retreats and trying to do meditation at home, and they were reading suttas and stuff like this, and they ended up committing suicide. But in every one of those situations, they don't actually have teachers. They don't have somebody that they can reach out to get help, and they're kind of backed into a corner, and for some reason their mind thinks that the only way out is to commit suicide. And that's because they don't have the wisdom. They lack wisdom, and they lack guidance of being able to reach out to a teacher and get the guidance that they need. But I haven't seen anybody that's ever studied with me that has committed suicide. But that's not to say that that couldn't happen someday, because it surely could. But I would encourage anybody who's thinking about suicide is to reach out to somebody for help. And if that person's me, great, I will help you. But there's also other people that could help in those situations too. Okay, let's see. I don't see any other questions anywhere. So let's go on to the next one. This is chapter 76. Okay, go ahead, Pat.
A monk who is not lacking of jhana. Monks, if for just the time of a finger snap, a monk develops mindfulness of breathing, he is called a monk who is not lacking of jhana, who acts upon the teachings of the teacher, who responds to his advice, and who does not eat the country's alms food, having produced no results or benefits. How much more, then, those who cultivate it?
Okay, thank you, Pat. This is just a really simple teaching where the Buddha is essentially helping you see that breathing mindfulness meditation leads to the jhanas, but it's not only breathing mindfulness meditation that you would need in order to get to the jhanas. So for example, if you were meditating, but you weren't practicing right speech, if you were being bitter and harsh and hostile and aggressive, resentful, you're not going to ever experience the jhanas. You need to put together all those steps of the Eightfold Path in order to be able to get into the jhanas. And it's the mindfulness of breathing or breathing mindfulness meditation that's going to help you with your mental discipline to then be able to practice the wisdom section, the moral conduct section, and the mental discipline section. So the Buddha is saying, okay, if you develop breathing mindfulness meditation, this is what leads to the jhanas. And if you cultivate it, this is going to help you to be able to get to the jhanas. But it's the entire Eightfold Path that's going to lead you to the jhanas. And that's why sometimes when people see little snippets like this, they really focus in on meditation, and they think meditation is the end all be all, where it's actually a certain important portion of your practice to get to enlightenment, but it's not the only thing. So that's why it's important to be able to see the teachings of the Buddha in totality and not be able to just hone in on this one particular teaching. Because the Buddha taught many different things. At this particular time, he's happening to focus on meditation and how important meditation is for the jhanas. But there's other teachings that you can see where he's talking about practicing the precepts and practicing the Eightfold Path and all these other things that you need to be able to see the teachings of the Buddha in their totality. It's not just this one particular aspect of the practice of meditation that's going to lead to the jhanas. And then you can see here where he talks about responding to a teacher's advice and acting upon a teacher's advice. And then here where he talks about not eating the country's alms food without having produced no results and benefits. This is where you can see that what the Buddha is guiding people to do is like, okay, if you're living on donations from the community, you should be practicing the teachings very closely and producing results and benefits within your own mind, because then the way you give back to your community who's supporting you with donations is you give them wisdom to be able to help them get closer and closer to enlightenment. Nowadays, we have so many people that are ordained. Maybe they're living off of donations from the public, but they're not actually practicing the teachings very closely. So therefore, the wisdom of how to get to enlightenment isn't coming back to the household practitioners. Because if those people who are living off of donations, if they're not practicing the teachings closely and cultivating their wisdom, they don't have any wisdom to give back to the community. So the Buddha was ensuring that those who were living off of the donations of the community were actually practicing the teachings closely and producing benefits and results within their own mind, because having done so, that's when they'll be best prepared to be able to share teachings that help the community to be able to further their practice and develop their wisdom to get closer to enlightenment themselves. So any questions here on this particular chapter? Okay, I'm not seeing any questions anywhere. So chapter 77, let me see what we've got here. Okay, is there someone who would like to read this one? This part here is the part that we've already read. So if you'd like to just read that first line and then just jump down after that, and that's where we can pick it up.
Okay. Breathing in and breathing out is a certain kind of body. Whenever another, a monk, when breathing in long, knows I breathe in long. When breathing out long, knows I breathe out long. Okay, not good. On that occasion, the monk resides reflecting on the body as body, dedicated, clearly comprehending, mindful, having removed craving and displeasure in regard to the world. For what reason? I call this certain kind of body, ananda, that is breathing in and breathing out. Therefore, ananda, on that occasion, the monk resides reflecting on the body as body, dedicated, clearly comprehending, mindful, having removed craving and displeasure in regard to the world.
Okay, thank you, Leo. So what the Buddha is going to be teaching you, not only in this discourse in kind of short form, but there's other discourses that you're going to see where the Buddha is teaching you that breathing mindfulness meditation is what leads to the development of the four foundations of mindfulness. Remember, those four foundations of mindfulness are being aware of the bodily sensations, those early warning system of the mind alerting you that you're about to experience discontentedness. Then there's the feelings in the mind, then there's the condition of the mind, then there's the mental objects. You're going to need to understand and be able to practice the four foundations of mindfulness and having awareness of the bodily sensations, the feelings, the condition of the mind, and the mental objects. The most subtle of all of these is the bodily sensations, and that's the one that is really important to be able to focus on. The other ones are important too, but if you can get ahead of the curve and really develop your awareness of the bodily sensations, that's what's going to help you really transform the mind. So what the Buddha is kind of alluding to here, and then he's going to get into in more detail in other discourses, is that by practicing breathing mindfulness meditation, it helps you to develop that very first foundation of the four foundations of mindfulness. And that's what's going to lead to removing the craving from the mind. That's how you actually get to the removal of craving, is through eliminating the discontentedness by cutting off and letting go at the bodily sensations. If you allow the mind to form the conditioned feeling, then the mind's going to stay wired that way. But if you can notice that the feeling is about to be formed as a bodily sensation, and you notice from the bodily sensation this early warning system that, oh my goodness, the mind's about to form a feeling, and you say, nope, not going to let you do that, slowly but surely, the mind's going to get rewired where it won't form any more conditioned feelings. But if you allow it to become a feeling, then it's going to experience that over and over. So you need to be aware of these bodily sensations, not just with the painful feelings and the neither painful nor pleasant, but the pleasant feelings as well. The conditional pleasant feelings are going to have bodily sensations. They're typically like tingling across the back of the shoulders, the neck, the head. We might call this warm fuzzies. Well, if you allow the mind to get conditional pleasant feelings, it's only a matter of time before you get the painful ones. The painful ones are waiting right around the corner, because whatever condition that the mind experienced to have that pleasant feeling, that condition's going to change, and now the mind's going to end up in the painful feelings. So you need to be able to see the conditional pleasant feelings as just as much a part of the problem as the painful ones. These are temporary pleasant feelings. In order to get to the permanent peace and joy and the permanent unconditioned happiness, you need to be able to get rid of this conditional happiness, where the mind is forming a feeling based on a condition, and it can only be happy in this condition. So if you stop the mind from doing that by being alerted to the conditioned pleasant feelings through the bodily sensations, you'll save yourself a whole lot of trouble, because if you don't allow the mind to get the conditioned pleasant feeling, you won't get the conditioned painful one. It's pretty intuitive to understand to eliminate conditioned painful feelings. The mind can understand that really well, because you don't like anger and sadness and frustration and stress and anxiety and guilt and shame and fear and all those others. But the idea of eliminating conditional pleasant feelings, the mind has a hard time to understand this. So if you guys can understand this, that the conditional pleasant feeling is temporary, and as soon as you get that conditioned pleasant feeling, that condition's going to change at some point, which means your mind's going to end up in the painful feelings, then you can see the importance of eliminating the conditional pleasant feelings. And you need to be able to be alerted to that by the bodily sensations. They're very subtle, and you have to really develop your mindfulness and awareness of mind very deeply in order to be able to observe and notice those conditional pleasant feelings arising as a bodily sensation first. And when the mind's alerting you, hey, I'm about to get this conditioned pleasant feeling, I'm about to get that conditioned pleasant feeling, and you feel those warm fuzzies, and wow, it feels so great, and you just want to indulge in it, you got to tell your mind, nope, not going to let you do that. Because you know what's waiting for you around the corner, which is the painful one. And if you can train your mind to let go of the temporary happiness, you can ultimately get to the permanent happiness, the unconditioned happiness. So let me know what questions you guys have here on this chapter. The Buddha is just kind of leading you in to show you that breathing mindfulness meditation is what's going to help you to develop the 4 foundations of mindfulness. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions anywhere. All right, so we'll go to the next one, which is chapter 78. It looks like Leo and Vibhav either have a question or would like to read. Which one? Leo, did you have a question or you'd like to read?
I have a question, actually.
Okay.
Yeah. I just realized that sometimes I have some kind of feeling a bit more in the head area, or just a subtle, and I'm not sure if it's a bodily sensation which tells me, oh, you need to be careful, there's coming something, or if it's just something else, because because right now also I have this a bit, but I'm not sure. There would be no reason why I should be becoming angry or something else. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I don't know if you also realized that in the past.
Yes. So these bodily sensations, they're temporary. They can last as short as like 1 second, and I've seen them last as long as 8 to 10 seconds. These bodily sensations are that early warning system. So it's going to happen in a finite period of time, and that's giving you the opportunity to cut it off and let it go. The more developed your mind is, you're going to get a longer period of bodily sensations, which gives you more time to act and take action. But early on, you might only notice them for a brief second before they actually becomes a feeling in the mind. So the more that you slow the mind down, the more you practice the breathing mindfulness meditation and generosity, it's going to get you this elongated period of time where you can observe and notice the bodily sensations and then take action. So if it's just a pain in the head that's persistent and ongoing, this isn't the bodily sensations that we're talking about with the 4 foundations of mindfulness. That might be something you need to look into, but this is a real finite, acute situation that's happening in a finite period of time.
Yeah, or some feeling a bit maybe in the stomach right now, but constantly, not really, not huge or something. Could it also be something else? It has nothing to do with this. It's not like it's just, yeah, I don't know. Sometimes there are these kind of small feelings, but it doesn't seem that I get angry after that or something. Maybe because I'm kind of cutting them off. But yeah, I'm just curious if there are also these kind of sensations which doesn't have to do with these kind of sensations you mean, but they are similar, like they feel similar, they have a similar taste. But yeah, I don't know. Just I'm not sure.
This is where you're going to need to look at it yourself. If you don't know, Leo, then I can't tell you, because you're the one who needs to practice the mindfulness and you need to look at it. I'm explaining to you what these bodily sensations are. They're this finite period of time. They're going to be sudden and acute and finite. And that's what these bodily sensations are that we're talking about. It doesn't sound like what you're describing is matching that, but you need to be able to cultivate the wisdom and see that for yourself. It can't just be me telling you about it. You've got to be able to see for yourself that what we're describing here are these temporary bodily sensations that come and go quite quickly. And then right afterwards, if you don't cut it off and let it go, there's going to be a feeling that comes into the mind, some kind of conditioned feeling. And that's going to come right after the bodily sensation. It doesn't sound like what you're describing is that, but you need to be able to see that with your own wisdom to know it for yourself.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Okay, Vibhav?
Yeah, thank you. I had a question on this. I think you partially answered it, but I'll just try to make sure I understand it. So you're saying, and I've experienced this myself sometime, where I can see that, I'm getting some sensation either through the temple, like my head kind of getting stressed. That's mostly what I feel in terms of when I'm, thinking about a situation, I guess. But it doesn't seem to me that I don't have the time I can sometimes cut it off after I realize that that's kind of, I'm thinking about it, but it's not become a feeling yet. But I don't have this, what you're saying, like the long time period where it says, okay, it's coming, or you're like we're just having warm fuzzies or some other feeling. There's not that long period where you're saying it's coming and then you can cut it off before it even gets to a point where you're thinking about it or making it into a feeling. So this seems already there by the time you realize it. Well, I realize it.
Yeah, that's because your mindfulness isn't developed enough yet. You haven't developed enough breathing mindfulness meditation and generosity to be able to notice those sooner and sooner. So you need to be able to develop your breathing mindfulness meditation on a consistent, ongoing basis to be able to cultivate your mind. And you're going to need to practice the mindfulness all throughout your day. And you'll get an elongated period of time eventually where you can take action. But right now, you've only been practicing with me for maybe 8 months or 9 months, I'm not sure. So it's going to take, multiple years for your mind to build up and cultivate this ability. It's not like either it's on or it's off. If you're just noticing the bodily sensations now, wonderful. Keep developing your breathing mindfulness meditation. Keep developing your mindfulness outside of meditation, and you'll notice that the time frame starts to elongate more and more and more, where eventually you're going to get longer and longer periods of time to be able to take action. But right now, you're just not at that point yet.
Okay, thank you. And I can read the next chapter if nobody else is reading.
Sure, perfect. Go ahead.
Mindfulness of the body. Here, a monk, gone to the forest or to the foot of a tree or to an empty hut, sits down, having folded his legs crosswise, set his body erect, and established mindfulness in front of him, Ever mindful, he breathes in. Mindful, he breathes out. Breathing in long, he understands. I breathe in long. Or breathing out long, he understands. I breathe out long. Breathing in short, he understands. I breathe in short. Or breathing out short, he understands. I breathe out short. He trains thus. I shall breathe in experiencing the whole body. He trains thus. I shall breathe out experiencing the whole body. He trains thus. I shall breathe in calming the bodily sensations. He trains thus. I shall breathe out calming the bodily sensations. As he decides thus diligent, dedicated, and determined, his memories and thoughts based on the household life are abandoned. With their abandoning, his mind becomes steadied internally, quieted, brought to singleness, and concentrated. That is how a monk develops mindfulness of the body.
Okay, thank you, Vibhav. So here, the Buddha is helping you to see a bit more about how this breathing mindfulness meditation leads to development of the four foundations of mindfulness and being aware of the bodily sensations. There's even more details than this that you guys are going to see, where he goes into even more detail and he shows you how this all works. So here, he's showing you how this breathing mindfulness meditation leads to the awareness of being able to experience the whole body. So that's why I teach that when you're in meditation and you're experiencing a itching sensation somewhere, that when you can, just ignore it. Keep bringing your mind back to the breath. Cut off any thoughts associated with that itch, and then just bring the mind back to the breath. And this is what's going to help you to be able to calm the bodily sensations. So when you start experiencing these itches in different parts of your body, then you calm that by cutting off and letting go and bringing the mind back to the breath. And then ultimately what the Buddha is guiding us to do is to let go of any of these yearning from the past. Here he's talking to ordained practitioners who were in the household life, and maybe they had a very luxurious, wonderful household life, and he's teaching them to let that go and to not dwell there. Well, even though you're still in the household life, what he's essentially doing is saying, let go of any of these memories from the past. Let's just say you had a turbulent relationship with a boyfriend or girlfriend. Let that go, abandon that. Or just say that you were very rich and very wealthy and had a very luxurious life in the past, and now you don't have that. Let that go. Right? Or say you were very poor, or say you were abused or experienced some kind of traumatic situation. Let that go. Steady the mind, quiet the mind, bring it to steadiness and singleness and concentration. So you'll always have memories of the things that you've done in life, particularly the real profound things, but you'll get to the point where they don't affect you anymore. So let's just say somebody was abused as a child. When you get to enlightenment, you'll know that you were abused as a child. You'll have those memories, but you won't form your inner feelings based on those things. You know that those things are impermanent. You know that they're in the past. You know that you've extinguished that karma, that nobody is ever going to abuse you ever again. And your mind is no longer sad or grieving or sorrowful based on those things in the past. So you might still remember that those things have occurred, but you're not going to be dwelling on them, and you're not going to be forming your inner feelings based on them. Whether it was something pleasant or painful, you need to train your mind to let that go and no longer dwell there and abandon those kinds of thoughts, because otherwise it's just going to plague you in the present moment, and you're not going to be able to get to the peace and joy that the Buddha is guiding you to develop. So any questions here on this chapter? Mindfulness of the body. Okay, it looks like Janae has a question in Facebook. Why is it easier to cut off a bodily sensation and harder to cut off a feeling in the mind? Because once the feeling comes into the mind, you got to get it out. If you can prevent it from ever coming into the mind, that's a lot easier for you. It's kind of like if you were in a boat going from one place to the other and you're in the middle of the ocean. It's easier to prevent the water from ever coming into the boat than once the water's in the boat, it's hard to get it out, right? So you would like to prevent the water from ever coming into the boat so you can keep sailing across the ocean, right? It's the same kind of thing that you would like to prevent the feeling from ever coming into the mind, because once that conditioned feeling is being formed and the mind has formed that feeling, it's a lot harder to break that up. But if the mind's getting ready to form a conditioned feeling and you can cut it off before it actually forms it, hey, that's straightforward and really easy. But the challenge is that you need to develop your mindfulness to the point where you can observe those bodily sensations sooner and sooner and sooner. And that'll give you more and more time to cut it off and let it go. That's where the Buddha talks about diligence and determination, not allowing the mind to be complacent, so that like when you're walking down the street, you need to be observant of the mind at all times. If an unwholesome thought comes into your mind, you got to cut it off right away. Don't allow it to sit there and dwell. Or if you're at home and you're having some complacency or you're having some evil, unwholesome thought, cut it off. It's much easier to cut these things off the sooner you find them and you cut them off. So for example, if someone was complacent for 2, 3, 4, 5 days or a week or two, it's a lot harder to come out of that complacency than if you can notice it in the first couple of hours or the first day or two. You can revert that and actually transform the mind easier than if you let this thing persist. So if you let the mind form a feeling, now it's actually formed that conditioned feeling. It's essentially wired that way. And you're trying to break that up so the mind no longer stays wired that way. So that's why it's easier when it's a bodily sensation, because it hasn't actually been formed yet. The mind isn't being wired that way. And then the more that you break that up, the mind will eventually stop forming conditioned feelings, which is a beautiful, beautiful thing. Okay. So now we'll move on to chapter 79. Is there someone who would like to read this? Okay. I don't know if Vipav has a question, or you maybe would like to read this one.
I had a question, but my question was more related to karma. You talked about like having like you said that doing the like following the path and doing all the work and doing the meditation, you're cleaning up the old karma or creating new karma that clean up your old karma. And so is it the case that before you get to enlightenment or when you get to enlightenment, you pretty much have cleaned up all your old karma so that no harm will come to you, or that still the case that harm may come to you even if you clean up your old karma? This part not clear to me.
Yeah, by the time you've gotten to enlightenment, you've eliminated all your unwholesome karma. No harm's going to come to you at that point. But you'll still experience sickness, aging, death, loss, and destruction. You can't stop those things because those are all based in impermanence. So no matter how enlightened you are, these are called the unobtainables, that you can't get permanent health, permanent youthfulness, permanent life. You're not going to never lose anything or have loss, or you're not going to experience destruction. These are all impermanence. So like, no matter how enlightened you are, you could still experience a tree falling on your house. And now that's destruction. You can't stop that from occurring. So this isn't your unwholesome karma. This is just impermanence that is happening. So by the time you get to enlightenment, you've extinguished all your unwholesome karma, and there's no harmful things that are going to come to you because you're not causing any harm in the world. So you've completely cleaned all that up, and you're only making wise decisions for a long time. So therefore, you're only experiencing wholesome results coming back to you, or wholesome karma.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. I think Pat was going to volunteer for this one, so go ahead, sir.
One who has developed and cultivated mindfulness of the body. Again, monks, when walking, a monk understands, I am walking. When standing, he understands, I am standing. When standing, he understands, I am sitting. When lying down, he understands, I am lying down. Or he understands accordingly, however his body is positioned. Again, monks, a monk is one who acts in full awareness when going forward and returning, who acts in full awareness when looking ahead and looking away, who acts in full awareness when flexing and extending his limbs, who acts in full awareness when wearing his robes and carrying his outer robe and bowl, who acts in full awareness when eating, drinking, consuming food, and tasting, who acts in full awareness when defecating or urinating, who acts in full awareness when walking, standing, sitting, falling asleep, waking up, talking, and keeping silent. As he resides thus diligent, dedicated, and determined, his memories and thoughts based on the household life are abandoned. With their abandoning, his mind becomes steadied internally, quieted, brought to singleness, and concentrated. That too, is how a monk develops mindfulness of body. Monks, anyone who has developed and cultivated mindfulness of the body has included within himself whatever wholesome states that lead to true wisdom. Just as anyone who has extended his mind over the great ocean has included within it whatever streams there are that flow into the ocean, so too, anyone who has developed and cultivated mindfulness of the body has included within himself whatever wholesome states there are that lead to true wisdom.
Okay. So, you can read this too if you like, Pat.
Okay. In addition, it was also mentioned that to develop reflection on unattractiveness of the body, 32 part body meditation, and to develop the first jhana all the way to the fourth jhana are also considered as developing mindfulness of the body.
Okay, thank you, sir. So here the Buddha is further helping you to be able to understand how to get to this point where you have the foundation of understanding the bodily sensations and be able to see those four foundations of mindfulness. So first he was talking about meditation. That's what's going to help you to cultivate the mind and get to the development of the four foundations of mindfulness. But now he's talking about practicing mindfulness in daily life. This is what I was just talking about earlier, that it's not just the meditation that's going to help you to develop the four foundations of mindfulness. You need to stay diligent and dedicated and determined to practice awareness of mind at all times in your day. And the Buddha is giving some different examples here. So he says when walking, sitting, lying down, and standing, that you would like to be able to have this awareness of the mind, right? That's what he's saying, that you need to be able to practice awareness of mind or mindfulness. You need to have awareness of any bodily sensations that are occurring. But then he talks about here more, right? And these bodily sensations that we're talking about, we're not talking about a simple itch. We're not talking about your toe hurts or your hip hurts, because you're going to be aware of those things. You're going to take action on those things. What we're talking about here is the four foundations of mindfulness of any bodily sensations associated with discontentedness. Because based on contact that you're having through the eyes, ears, nose, tongue, the body, and the mind, if you have cravings in your mind, it's going to trigger something. And you got to be aware and diligent of any bodily sensations, because by the time the mind gets the feeling, you still need to cut it off and let it go there. But at that point, the mind's already formed the conditioned feeling. So it's kind of like your mindfulness is like a virus scanner on your computer, where your virus scanner is there. It's running all the time. It's in the background. It's running all the time. And if at any point a virus hits your hard drive, the virus scanner pops into action, it quarantines it, and then it starts cleaning it up and getting rid of it, right? So your mindfulness of the bodily sensations is the same way. You need your mindfulness to be running all the time. Even though you're sitting there talking, or you're urinating or defecating, or you're walking, standing, sitting, falling asleep, waking up, talking, keeping silent, anything that you're doing, eating, drinking, consuming food, tasting, any of these kinds of things that the Buddha is talking about, you need your virus scanner running all the time. That's your mindfulness, where you stay aware of the mind. And if at any point you see any bodily sensations arising associated with discontentedness based on the contact that you're getting through your sense bases, you need to take action. Spring into action and cut that off and let it go, just like your virus scanner. Okay? And then the Buddha goes into further details about this as well. Okay, so it's your combination of practicing breathing mindfulness meditation and practicing mindfulness in day-to-day life, like that virus scanner, that's going to ultimately help you develop your mindfulness and be able to take action to cut off and let go of any arising bodily sensations. And this is what's going to really transform your mind, because if you can cut off and let go, not allow the mind to form that conditioned feeling, you're going to save yourself a whole lot of trouble. But of course, your mind's not going to be there right now. You need to work at this. You are going to experience some conditioned feelings on your way to enlightenment. Even in the third stage of enlightenment, you're still experiencing some amount of feelings of conditional feelings. They're very minimal, they're very infrequent, but you're still going to be experiencing them. So each time you experience anger or sadness or frustration or any other discontent feeling, don't beat yourself up about this. Don't, think that you're failed or anything like this, because you're going to experience some conditioned feelings between now and enlightenment. You're going to experience plenty of them. But each time that happens, pay more and more attention to it and cut it off and let it go, and try to back it up to the point where you're cutting it off as a bodily sensation. When you get to the point that you're cutting off and letting go at the bodily sensations every single time consistently, enlightenment is about 1 to 3 years away. It's very close. Enlightenment is very close by. When you develop the 4 foundations of mindfulness and you can see the bodily sensations and you can cut it off and let it go every single time as a bodily sensation, you're going to be getting to enlightenment in about 1 to 3 years from that point. So that's why it's so important to develop your breathing mindfulness meditation and be practicing mindfulness at all times during your life, so you can get to that point that you can cut off and let go as a bodily sensation, because that's what's really going to transform the mind. Okay, so Vibhav, you have a question? Go ahead, sir.
Thank you. I guess my question was around mindfulness. It seems to me, at least from my experience, that it's easier to develop mindfulness while you have some developed, whatever development you have on the mindfulness on the meditation, because in my experience, if you could you can do some mindfulness, but if you don't have like a developed mindfulness, the breathing meditation, then you kind of, it comes and goes, and mindfulness comes and goes. I just want to get your thoughts on it.
Yeah, so
because there's a lot of text out there, you see that a lot of people just there are books out there that say this is how you should eat, or you should develop your mindfulness of eating or walking or other things. But it seems to me that the prerequisite is meditation to developing proper mindfulness.
Yeah, you don't have to develop your mindfulness of eating or mindfulness of walking. This is where people are confused. What the Buddha is describing here is he's describing that while you're eating, drinking, or consuming food or tasting, you have full awareness of the mind. Not awareness of the eating, drinking, consuming food, or tasting, but awareness of the mind. That if there's anything that comes up in terms of bodily sensations, you cut it off and let it go. So as you're experiencing contact, like say you're eating something and you eat something sour or bitter, and you notice that the mind is like repulsed by it, you've got to be able to know that through observing the mind. That's what you're actually developing. So the more you develop your awareness of mind, you can be practicing it all times during your day. You're developing the awareness of the mind. The fact that you are either eating or sleeping or defecating or urinating, that's irrelevant. What you're doing is you're developing 100% mindfulness at all waking times during your day. And you need to be doing this as soon as the mind's starting to wake up, all day long, and then even as you're going to sleep. Because as you're waking up in the morning, your thoughts can invade you. Your mind's not fully awake yet. Or as you're going to sleep at night, your thoughts can invade you there too. So you need to have full awareness of the mind and be aware of anything that's coming up and cut it off and let it go. So if you're falling asleep at night and you're like, oh God, that meeting that I'm going to have tomorrow, gosh, I don't want to see that guy. Oh, it's going to be such a horrible meeting. You got to cut that off before the mind starts having that thought. That's like that negative thinking, right? Or if you're waking up in the morning and you're like, oh gosh, one more day of work, I got to drag myself into this place. Well, first of all, you need to find a new job if somebody was thinking that way. But next, you need to cut that off and let it go. Is you need to be able to cut off and let go of any of these thoughts that might be invading you. And that's what the Buddha is teaching you, is not to be aware of the eating itself, but awareness of the mind.
Okay, but this seems to be a big misunderstanding, because there's a lot of this, you don't have to really focus on each and every bite of your food you eat, right? That's what seems to be the general perception of mindfulness out in the world.
Yeah, that's a huge misunderstanding, and that's why people aren't getting to enlightenment, because you're not focused on the individual bites of food. You need to focus on the mind. That's where you're focused on, is making sure that as you're biting the food, if there's any discontentedness that's arising, you take action of inside the mind. That's what you're actually doing.
Okay, this is a revelation. Thank you.
What's that?
This is a revelation, I'm saying.
Oh, yeah, pleased to help you. Okay, it looks like Leo has a question too. Go ahead, sir.
Yeah, I had the same misunderstanding than before. So what is okay? So what's about when I eat? But is it good to have the concentration on the focus on eating? You said it's not. It's more that if I eat, that I'm ready to see any craving coming up and taking action, right?
Yes.
But if I walk down the street, if I eat something, isn't it good to have the focus on eating? Because if I wouldn't do this, if I wouldn't have the focus on eating, then maybe there would be thoughts but I would like to do the thing I'm doing, right? Or what is your thought about that?
Yeah, you need to practice singleness of mind and make sure that if you're eating, you're eating. But in terms of mindfulness and awareness of mind, you're not focused on the eating because, yes, you need to eat, right? You need to pay attention that you're putting the food into the right spot. But your mindfulness and awareness of mind is in the mind. It's not on the eating itself. Sometimes people think they have to focus on every little bite. It's like the mind is almost obsessively doing this. It's like almost like obsessive compulsive disorder, where I've seen people that they misunderstand what the Buddha is teaching here and they try to intensely focus on every single little bite, almost like a robot or some kind of machine. That's not what the Buddha is teaching you at all. You can just sit there and eat and then just practice singleness of mind. And then whenever you're having mindfulness, whenever there's any discontentedness that's arising and you would like to cut that off and let it go. That's what he's teaching you. That if you're functioning like a robot or you're obsessively thinking about every little bite of food, this isn't what an enlightened being does.
Okay, but where is the intention then? And I'm eating? Yeah.
I'm sorry, what's your question?
I mean, that if I don't focus on the eating, so I understand that it's good not to focus so strong on the eating. Makes sense, kind of. But then if I don't do this, the mind is more bouncing around or not. Like I'm eating, but then the mind goes to some thought, then goes there, then yeah.
Yeah, if you use the analogy that I used with the virus scanner, that's your mindfulness, right? So while you're focused on typing out your email, that's what you're focused on. The virus scanner is there looking to make sure that if there's any viruses that hit your hard drive, that it takes care of it, right? So it's the same thing. Like you can focus on the actual eating. That's your singleness of mind. That's your concentration. That's right concentration. But then there's right mindfulness. This is a different step. This is a different factor. This is a different aspect of the mind. It's not the same thing. You guys are confusing this, as many people have, is that when you're eating and you're focused on the eating, that's your right concentration. That's your singleness of mind. But then you need to have your right mindfulness, your virus scanner, sitting there looking at the mind, that if there's any bodily sensations or discontentedness that is arising, you take action with that.
It sounds a bit like because I'm focused on eating, but also I'm focused on being mindful. Isn't it two kind of focusing, like focusing on what I'm eating, but also focusing on, is there coming something? Also having this focusing on the awareness. It sounds like that for me.
Yeah, these are two different things. There's right concentration and then there's right mindfulness. They're two separate things. Right now, you might be seeing them as the same because maybe your concentration isn't well developed or your mindfulness isn't well developed, or maybe both of these things aren't well developed. But when you develop these, you'll see these as two separate things. There's concentration and the focus, like I can focus and look into this camera, but the mind can be aware of what's going on in the mind. So these are two different qualities that you're cultivating in the mind. There's the concentration and focus, and then there's the awareness of the mind itself. These are two different qualities. You're doing one thing, which is focusing on the camera, but the mind is having awareness of mind at all times, like the virus scanner.
And this mindfulness is doing it by itself, right? Or not? So I'm focusing on eating or on writing an email, and because my mindfulness is developed over the time, it is always there, kind of.
Yeah, by the time you get into the jhanas and you're moving out of the jhanas, your mindfulness will be fully developed. If you're not in the jhanas yet, then you're going to have these kinds of complications where you're not seeing the delineation between concentration and mindfulness. But once you get into the jhanas and you're moving out of the jhanas, you'll see concentration as one thing, and you'll see mindfulness and awareness of mind of something completely separate. And now you'll be able to see that that mindfulness is just there all the time, and it's always working. And then you can have your concentration more and more and more where you're focused on any particular task that you're doing.
Okay, but should I now try still to see the mindfulness, because I'm not at the jhanas now, I haven't been there, so or should I wait until I reach the jhanas and then it's there, or should I, as you say, still try to see that mindfulness?
What you should do is practice the Eightfold Path. If you're practicing the Eightfold Path, that's going to culminate in the jhanas themselves. So it's not like choosing, should I do concentration or should I do mindfulness? You're actually doing all these things at one time, because the Eightfold Path has all those 8 steps. You would like to dial all this in at the same time. So you need to be practicing all those steps at all times. So breathing mindfulness meditation is part of that. Focusing on the mind, practicing singleness of mind is part of that. Practicing mindfulness and awareness of mind is part of that. You need to be developing all of those factors of the Eightfold Path so that you can get into the jhanas. So be sure you understand what each one of those factors are, and that you're practicing them very closely.
Okay. Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, Vibhav, do you have another question, or are you volunteering to read?
I had one last question. So I guess the question on, so I get the difference between mindfulness and concentration now, where when we're eating, we are concentrating on eating, and we are being mindful that, like you said, the virus scanner, where you're ensuring that you don't have any conditional feelings. My question is on concentration itself, and so I guess and that's what you're trying to, I guess, tell us through what the level of concentration. Like, you don't have to be like so focused on eating that you are focusing on each and every bite and each and every movement of your mouth, making like chewing and everything. You generally be focused on eating and making sure you're not doing other things at the same time. Right? That's what you're trying to say.
Yeah, so if you're eating, you're just eating. And now maybe you're even listening to somebody, right? You're just eating, and now you're listening to somebody talk, but all the while you've got your mindfulness there, that if any time there's any bodily sensations that start to arise associated with discontentedness or a feeling or a condition of the mind or a mental object, you cut that off and let it go. So you can just focus on whatever it is that you're focused on, but you don't have to get down to the obsessive nature of every little bite, every little chewing, every little thing. This is where people are actually working themselves in the opposite direction of enlightenment if they're looking at it that obsessively.
And it's okay to have conversations with your family if you're having a dinner table and stuff while having the same concentration and mindfulness, right?
Yeah, so if you're eating and you're chewing, you're not talking, right? You're just chewing. And now when you're done chewing, now you conversate and you have a conversation, right? And now when you speak, now you might start chewing again, right? So that's where you can be doing one thing at a time. So it's not like you have to sit there and quiet, and just talk and not eat, or you have to just sit there and everybody's quiet while you're eating. You can chew, as you're eating, you can chew. And then when you swallow, now you have a little bit of conversation. And then when you're done, you start eating again, right? So you can kind of go back and forth like this, and you can alternate. But the mind's only doing one thing at a time. It's either chewing or it's talking.
Okay, thank you. This is really helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. All right, so let me check, see if we have any questions here. I don't see any questions anywhere. All right, so now we'll go to chapter 80. This is where you're going to see more detail on how the Buddha is describing using breathing mindfulness meditation to develop awareness of the bodily sensations. Would someone like to read this one? Okay, Keely, go ahead, ma'am.
Mindfulness directed to the body, a strong thought or mind, which goes without having set up mindfulness of the body. Suppose monks or men would catch 6 animals with different domains and different feeding grounds, and tie them by a strong rope. He would catch a snake, a crocodile, a bird, a dog, a jackal, and a monkey, and tie each by a strong rope. Having done so, he would tie the ropes together with a knot in the middle and release them. Then, those 6 animals with different domains and different feeding grounds would each pull in the direction of its own feeding ground and domain. The snake would pull one way, thinking, "Let me enter an anthill." The crocodile would pull another way, thinking, "Let me enter the water." The bird would pull another way, thinking, "Let me fly up into the sky." The dog would pull another way, thinking, "Let me enter a village." The jackal would pull another way, thinking, "Let me enter a charnel ground." The monkey would pull another way, thinking, "Let me enter a forest." Now, when these 6 animals become worn out and fatigued, they would be dominated by one among them that was strongest. They will submit to it and come under its control. So too monks, when a monk has not developed and cultivated mindfulness directed to the body, the eye pulls in the direction of agreeable forms and disagreeable forms as repulsive. The ear pulls in the direction of agreeable sounds and disagreeable sounds are repulsive. The nose pulls in the direction of agreeable odors and disagreeable odors are repulsive. The tongue pulls in the direction of agreeable flavors and disagreeable flavors are repulsive. The body pulls in the direction of agreeable physical objects and disagreeable physical objects are repulsive. The mind pulls in the direction of agreeable mental objects and disagreeable mental objects are repulsive. It is in such a way that there is non-restraint.
Let me have you pause there for a second, Keely, because I would like to explain this, and then we're going to see the opposite of this in a moment. The Buddha is talking about one who does not have mindfulness of the body, meaning that you don't have this awareness of the bodily sensations. And he's using this analogy that there's these 6 animals, they all have a rope around their neck, and they're tied at a knot together. And these 6 animals are tugging and pulling in different directions. When 5 of them become tired, it's the one who's the strongest is going to dominate the others and drag it, right? So if the crocodile is the strongest, then it's going to pull and drag all the others because all the others have gotten tired. Now it's going to pull and drag. And he's relating this to the 6 sense spaces, that your mind is pulling in all these different 6 directions. And when you don't have mindfulness of the body, then whatever sense space is the strongest, the mind is going to pull in that direction. So for example, say you're having sexual cravings towards a certain gender or a certain type of individual. And now when you see people, you get these pleasant feelings. When you hear people talking with a certain voice, you get these pleasant feelings. When you smell certain colognes or perfumes, you get this certain excitement and pleasant feelings, and then so forth with the tongue, the body, and the mind itself. Well, your mind is pulling in all these different directions, and you're kind of noticing all these different things. And this is where the mind can become very exhausted by the end of your day, because the mind's pulling in all these different directions. Well, if you don't have mindfulness of the body, that means when all these other sense bases are tired, then maybe your mind pulls through the eyes towards this handsome man or this beautiful woman, and your mind's pulling in that direction, right? So that's what the mind is experiencing when there's no restraint, that there's no awareness of the bodily sensations, so the mind doesn't have any restraint or any discipline whatsoever. But now the Buddha is going to show you the opposite of this. What happens when one does have mindfulness of the bodily sensations established? Okay, Keely.
One recites having set up mindfulness of the body. Suppose monks or men would catch 6 animals with different domains and different feeding grounds, and tie them by a strong rope. he would catch a snake, a crocodile, a bird, a dog, a jackal, and a monkey, and tie each by a strong rope. Having done so, he would bind them to a strong post or pillar. Then those 6 animals with different domains and different feeding grounds would each pull in the direction of its own feeding ground and domain. The snake would pull one way, thinking, "Let me enter and ant hill." The crocodile would pull another way, thinking, "Let me enter the water." The bird would pull another way, thinking, "Let me fly up into the sky." The dog would pull another way, thinking, "Let me enter a village." The jackal would pull another way, thinking, "Let me enter a channel ground." The monkey would pull another way, thinking, "Let me enter a forest." Now, when these 6 animals become worn out and fatigued, they would stand close to that post or pillar. They would sit down there. They would lie down there. So too, monks, when a monk has developed and cultivated mindfulness directed to the body, the eye does not pull in the direction of agreeable forms, nor are disagreeable forms repulsive. The ear does not pull in the direction of agreeable sounds, nor are disagreeable sounds repulsive. The nose does not pull in the direction of agreeable odors, nor are disagreeable odors repulsive. The tongue does not pull in the direction of agreeable flavors, nor are disagreeable flavors repulsive. The body does not pull in the direction of agreeable physical objects, nor are disagreeable physical objects repulsive. The mind does not pull in the direction of agreeable mental objects, nor are disagreeable mental objects repulsive. It is in such a way that there is restraint. A strong post or pillar, this, monks, is a designation for mindfulness directed to the body. Therefore, monks, you should train yourself thus. You will develop and cultivate mindfulness directed to the body. Make it our vehicle, make it our basis, stabilizes it, exercise ourselves in it, and fully perfect it. Thus should you train yourselves. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Keely. So here the Buddha is explaining in the previous part where he's saying, okay, if you don't have mindfulness directed to the body, if you don't have this awareness of the bodily sensations, you're going to see contact through the 6 sense bases as either agreeable or disagreeable. When you see certain forms, it's going to be either agreeable or disagreeable. When you hear certain sounds, they're going to be agreeable or disagreeable. This is the craving, desire, attachment, and that's why the mind is experiencing discontentedness. But here, if you have mindfulness developed of the bodily sensations, and you've been able to cut off and cut off and cut off, and you don't allow the mind to form conditioned feelings, instead of the animals pulling in all these different directions and the one that's the strongest is now dominating all the others, instead you've got this post or pillar, and they're all pulling in these different directions, but then eventually they're going to sit down, they're going to lie down, they're going to be calm next to that post and pillar because they realize they can't pull any longer. And when you get to the point where your mind's not pulling any longer, you don't see things as agreeable and disagreeable. The mind has eliminated that because the cravings, desires, attachments no longer exist. So you don't see things as agreeable and disagreeable anymore. You're not repulsed by things any longer. And you're also not, chasing after things any longer. So that post or pillar in your meditation is the breath. That's the post or pillar that you need to keep bringing the mind back to over and over and over and over and over and over again. And eventually the mind will just sit down and be calm and steady and stable right there at the breath. And that's what you need to be able to develop in your meditation, but you also need to develop in your day-to-day life, that whenever you see your mind pulling, you need to yank it back and yank it back and yank it back. And over time, you're going to have this restraint built up in the mind, and eventually the mind won't pull anymore. You can be completely pleased with one thing, or you can be pleased with another thing, that the mind is not discontent about these particular things. So let me know if you guys have questions on this one. Okay, it looks like Leo has a question. Go ahead, sir.
Just not particular to this one, but because I just wanted to ask again, because I just scratched myself, and and my attention was going to the scratching. This is good, right? This is having attention on what I'm doing. But it was automatically. So sometimes it would happen that I scratch myself and my attention wouldn't be there scratching. So maybe I wouldn't even realize that I scratch myself. So is it a good sign if my attention goes to the scratching? I mean, I'm not focusing so deeply on that. It's just that, scratching. Well, how can I understand?
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah.
If you're scratching the body, you're not scratching yourself, right? Because there's no self here.
Yeah.
You're scratching the body. That's fine. If your attention goes there and you're focused there, that's no problem.
If the attention wouldn't go there, also fine, no problem. Or
it depends.
Then status of mind would be I'm doing this action, right? Scratching. So my attention should be there, right? Or no?
The body can do more than one thing, but the mind can only be in one place at a time. You can have your mind in a particular place while the body does something else. So if I'm talking to you right now, but the body is also being scratched, I can focus on the talking, but the body is scratching the head, right? So it's not that every single time that you scratch, you need to have focus on the scratching. This is like the obsessive nature that the mind has sometimes. Because sometimes you're going to be talking and you need to scratch at the same time, but the mind is focused on the talking and having the conversation. So your mind is focused wherever it needs to be in practicing singleness of mind. You shouldn't think about it like the way that I think you are, which is every time you scratch, you need to somehow be thinking about the scratch. That's not the case. Your mind needs to be in just one place at a time, and that's all it can do anyway, and just focus on that thing. But don't be switching back and forth. So if I'm talking to you and now I'm scratching, I'm not focused on the scratching at all. The body is doing the scratching, but I can stay 100% focused on talking to you. I don't need to focus on the scratching because that's what the body's doing. But the mind's focused on the discussion and the conversation. So you can see that the body can do multiple things, but the mind can only be in one place at a time. Okay, you're welcome. All right, Vibhav.
Can you go down the chapter, please? The second part. So here, when Buddha says that we have cultivated mindfulness directed the body, and we are not seeing any from all the six sense bases, we don't see agreeable or disagreeable objects. We just see the same. And so, when we are talking about the jhanas, and they say that in the fourth jhana, the mindfulness is fully developed, right? And so, and by the end of the fourth jhana, we should be in the state where nothing that we see, or like any of the six sense bases that we experience, we should have any agreeable or disagreeableness, like, or any repulsion or any attractiveness to any of the six sense bases.
That doesn't occur in the jhanas. That occurs after you've gotten into the stages of enlightenment. So it's not until the mind's actually enlightened that you no longer experience things being agreeable or disagreeable. And that's everything. But on your way to enlightenment, there's going to be certain situations where you don't see things as agreeable or disagreeable. And in that situation, you're having restraint. But in these other situations over here, you're still seeing things as agreeable and disagreeable. It's not until your mind's actually enlightened that there won't be any agreeable or disagreeable things in the mind, because all cravings have been extinguished.
Okay, so what this basically is saying that you will see six sense bases as agreeable or disagreeable, but you will be able to restrain it with your mindfulness. So that's the essence of this.
Yeah, he's talking about restraint, that in a situation where you're experiencing contact through the sense bases and you don't see it as agreeable or disagreeable, in that situation there is restraint. But that's not to say that your mind doesn't have agreeable and disagreeable things in other situations. That's when you're in the first, second, third stage of enlightenment, you're still going to be having agreeable and disagreeable things going on in the mind. It's not until your mind's enlightened that all agreeable and disagreeable things is out of the mind. But you're going to have certain situations where you don't have agreeable and disagreeable, and in that situation there is restraint.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Okay. All right. I don't see any questions, but let me just check one more time. Oh, here's one from Janae. In your day-to-day life, can you pull your mind back to the breath, or can you only do that during meditation? Yeah, you can do it in day-to-day life too. Like, just say you're driving and somebody cuts you off and you get stopped at the red light and you start noticing that there's some frustration and it's a bodily sensation. You can cut that off and you can just focus on the breath. Remember that teaching that the Buddha shared with you today is that breathing mindfulness meditation eliminates any evil, unwholesome states on the spot. So if you're stopped at the light, you're like, focus on the breath. Focus on the breath. That's going to train the mind to not have that conditioned feeling. So you can do that for sure outside of meditation too. And that's one of the benefits of having a well-developed meditation practice, is that outside of meditation, you'll be able to use that from time to time, just to give yourself a little touch up here or there. You know, you get some bad news on the phone and now you're off the phone. You can have that 1 or 2 minutes worth of just breathing and focusing on the breath, and you can cut that off and cut that off. It doesn't have to be a full out meditation session. So that's one of the benefits of having cultivated a mind and done breathing mindfulness meditation, is you'll have that at your disposal at any particular time. Okay, I'm not seeing any other questions anywhere. So what I'm going to do is just thank all of you guys for attending class today. Thank you for reading. Thank you for your questions. I appreciate all your interest in learning. I appreciate you understanding about my cough. At some point, this body's going to get healthy again. We'll see. I've been taking a little bit of medicine here and there. So thank you all for understanding that. Next week, we're going to be in chapters 81 through 90, still in volume 3. This is a book that goes up to 124 chapters. So we're going to be in this book for a little while. So we're going to be in chapters 81 through 90, and that's what we'll be studying next week. So if you'd like to study ahead of time, you're more than welcome to. Tomorrow in the group learning program, we're going to be studying the 5 hindrances and the 7 factors of enlightenment. You'll be able to learn that, because those 7 factors of enlightenment are what's actually going to help you to eliminate the 5 hindrances. And then the following Sunday, we're going to be starting over from the very beginning. So if you have friends or family that would like to join the group learning program, it's a great time for them to learn. You can join at any time, but it's always nice to start at the beginning. Or if you yourself would like to start over and attend some of those classes, because you might need a refresher on the Four Noble Truths or the Eightfold Path or any of those kinds of things, you guys are also welcome to attend those as well. So thank you all for joining, and perhaps we'll see you guys in a future class. Have a very lovely and wonderful rest of your day. Take care. Sawadee-ka.
Thank you for listening to this podcast. To provide support for this podcast, visit patreon.com/support Buddha. To access more teachings, visit buddhadailywisdom.com. There, you will discover a full range of courses, retreats, and online resources to assist you on the path to enlightenment. Remember to establish a daily, consistent meditation practice, along with learning and practicing these teachings. A well-developed meditation practice is the foundation in which to train the mind to attain enlightenment.